Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. We will be covering modules 4, 5, and 6 during this session. Once again, our expectation for today's meeting are as follows. Please keep your camera on and your microphone on mute unless you're asked to unmute. This just provides us a little bit quieter of an atmosphere, less feedback. Participate with your colleagues during this presentation. Your ideas and your feedback are great and they're meaningful, so please don't hesitate to share. Take part in all breakout rooms and chat sessions. Keep all posts and conversations positive. You did a great job with doing that yesterday, and we hope to continue these same great conversations today. Teacher credibility at a distance, Module 4. Once again, you'll see that there are learning intentions and success criteria as been present in other models. Today's learning intentions are, I am learning what teacher credibility means. I'm learning ways to maintain my credibility with students from a distance. Here are today's success criteria. Just a reminder, these success criteria are your way, as well as your students, to tell how well you're doing in today's objectives. Today's success criteria are, I can develop routines and procedures that ensure trust is maintained during distance learning. I can demonstrate my competence using familiar routines and acknowledge new learning, especially related to technology. I can bring passion to synchronous and asynchronous learning for my students. I can find ways to maintain immediacy with students in distance learning, and I can support others in developing and maintaining their credibility. Today, we're going to be delving into teacher credibility and its effects on student learning. So, what is teacher credibility? That's the most important question to answer, right? Here it is, simply as it can be. At the most basic level, teachers need to be seen as believable, convincing, and capable of persuading students that they can be successful. Teacher credibility is always a factor. So let's look a little deeper at this. Teacher credibility has an effect size of 1.09, which is incredible. Basically, this means that if your students believe that they can learn from you, they will likely learn a lot more than if they do not believe it. What's important to note is the credibility that a teacher has with their students changes. It's dynamic. It's not the same for all students at the same time. Teachers and students should have a healthy growth-producing relationship. Again, we're constantly going back to the relationships. It's truly hard to imagine that teachers can be seen as credible without strong relationships. There are 4 main components of teacher credibility: trust, dynamism, competence, and immediacy. Let's take a look at each of them in a bit more depth. The first one is trust. Trust is your currency. Your students need to know that their teachers really care about them as individuals. They want to know that their teachers are true to their word and are reliable. So how do we do that? Well, it's a combination of things, and some of them are very simple. Number 1, if you make a promise, work to keep it. Or if you can't keep it, explain why. Be truthful. 2, tell the students truth about their performance. They know when what they're doing is good and when it's subpar. Be truthful with them about what they are doing. 3, don't work to try to catch students in the wrong. Yes, students make mistakes. Yes, it is our job to correct those mistakes, but don't make it your life's mission to catch students doing things wrong. Number 4, examine any negative feelings that you have about specific students, and then do things to work past them. I'm sure many of you have heard of Stephen Covey. He wrote books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The Leader in Me, and also The Speed of Trust, which is mentioned in this book. In The Speed of Trust, he talks about when trust exists, things go faster. And you know that's true. Just think of how that works in your own personal lives. Another study identified 5 more elements for trust to be developed and maintained. 1, benevolence, basically confidence that one's well-being or something that one cares about will be protected by the trusted party. So when you take that into the classroom, that you're not going to take advantage or exploit students, even if there's an opportunity. This holds hands very closely with sarcasm. Sometimes students don't understand sarcasm, and they can see that as a betrayal of trust. Honesty, the trusted person's character, integrity, and authenticity. Openness, the extent to which relevant information is shared. Openness signals reciprocal trust. You know that through the conversations that you've had with your students. Reliability, consistency of behavior and knowing what to expect from others. A sense of confidence that one's needs will be met in positive ways. And competency, the ability to perform as expected and according to standards appropriate to the task at hand. It's important to note that a decrease in trust happens when teachers are seen as unreliable. This is simple as being late to class, or forgetting that you had an afternoon class, or if you end a session early. It indicates a lack of preparation and can be seen as a lack of interest in your students and in the class. Another big one is when you distribute grades without any meaningful comments. It makes kids believe that you aren't even reading what they wrote, or that you don't care about their opinions or thoughts. How do you personalize this a bit more? Sometimes you can do audio files to different writings and works that are on the computer. Google allows you to do that. I love this. I trust my teacher because I know she loves me. What is important to note, though, and a word of caution and a little food for thought, is that when students have this kind of trust, there is a level of comfort, right? My youngest son is obsessed with Spider-Man. So what's that quote? With great power comes great responsibility. Trust is power. It is definitely a form of power. So keep in mind, when people trust you, they ask questions of you. They want feedback. They look to you for comfort. So be ready. Be ready for the questions that might come to you. There's stories of young students whose families were affected by COVID asking their teachers if their loved ones were going to die. What a heavy question for a little person to ask. How do you respond? Remember, they trust you and they're looking for you for guidance and support. Part of that trust is based that you tell them the truth. How do you handle questions like that? Those are things to think about. And on the flip side of a coin, something like an 11th grader asking you who you're voting for in November. It's perfectly acceptable to engage with this question, but you have to have a specific answer in mind. Something like, voting is a very private matter and we don't usually talk about it, but we're lucky to be able to have that right, aren't we? Or, we have private places to vote in the United States called polls so that people can vote what's in their heart. It doesn't matter who I'm voting for. That's something that's very personal to me. It's a decision that should be something personal for you too. You vote what's in your heart. So you're addressing the question, you're validating them, but you're also keeping that line between professional and student. You demonstrate your competence when you deliver accurate, organized, and cohesive instruction. In addition to trust, students want to know that their teachers know their stuff and know how to teach it. Students measure competence by their ability of the teacher to deliver instruction that's coherent and organized. How do we demonstrate competence? Don't be fooled. Your position does not mean that students automatically view you as competent. It's proved day in and day out by knowing your content and knowing it well, organizing lesson delivery in a coherent and cohesive way, and body language. They know if you're exuding confidence or when you look defensive. Know that it's okay to make mistakes. It doesn't damage your competence. Your willingness to, or your unwillingness to admit that you make mistakes, however, does. So let's think about this in terms of distance learning. In some ways, we all feel like a first-year teacher all over again. It's okay to tell them that you're learning. It's okay to tell them that you're not an expert and that you're going to make mistakes. In fact, I might say that the first day. Expect the mistakes. We're going to ride them out together. If you have any feedback, tell me. If you have any suggestions, let me know. They may be kids, but that does not preclude them from having great ideas and great suggestions. So seek those out. Okay, let's head to the chat. What contributes to or detracts from a presenter's competence in an online session? Take a minute, think about it, and then put your comments in the chat. Principals, please pause the video here. Dynamism. Dynamism is your enthusiasm. Are you excited for your class? Are you excited about the students that are in front of you? Are you excited for your content? How do the kids know? Everyone has their own ways. Your passion didn't change because you're teaching from a distance. Make sure your kids know that. There's the tone of your voice, the emotional, sometimes personal stories that you tell, or the presentation techniques that you use. If you asked any of my former students what my favorite topic was, they would be able to tell you, every single one of them. My history students would tell you, oh, Mrs. Wozniak loves the Kennedy presidency. And if you were to walk into my office today, you would see evidence of that pretty much everywhere. My psychology students would tell you that I love talking about dissecting the reasons why people do the things that they do. Other ways I showed the kids I was excited for them in our time together in class, I'd greet them at the door every day and my name. I would take time to make brief conversation with every student in my class, even if it was only 20 seconds, so they knew that I saw them and that they mattered to me. I used to incorporate fun things in class as well, like High Five Fridays. We had a theme and a slogan. It was, if Friday doesn't deserve a high five, what does? So I would stand out the door every Friday and I would give high five or fist bumps to students as they left for the day. I'd also give Smarties to students on days of their celebration of learning to inspire them. What are celebrations of learning? That's a fancy word for test. But they got excited about it. I'd also then joke that Smarties were a good sign. I told them to worry when I started handing out dum-dums. Now, granted, this is 11th grade. They understood the joke. Are you struggling with any of this? It's okay. Sometimes we get in a rut. What's important to know is that we recognize it and we can see when our enthusiasm is a little off par. So here's some ways to combat that. Rekindle your passion for the content that you teach by focusing on the aspects that got you excited as a student. I'm pretty sure that my excitement for the Kennedy administration came from my 11th grade history class when I was in it. Consider the relevance of your lessons. Is there an application outside the classroom? Does this mean something to your students, or are they just doing it to do it in their own minds? Seek feedback from trusted colleagues about your lesson delivery. Ask peers to sit on virtual lessons and ask for them for suggestions. There's something to be said about, putting two heads together. So if there's something that you're struggling with, ask one of your friends in the building or in another building to sit in on your lesson and see what they could suggest for you. Immediacy is your accessibility and relatability. The concept of immediacy was introduced by a social psychologist back in 1971. He noted that people are drawn towards persons and things that they like. They evaluate highly and prefer, and they avoid or move away from the things they dislike or evaluate negatively or do not prefer. Now, this may seem like common sense, but it's true. Teachers who move around the room and are easy to interact with increase the students' perception of immediacy. In the virtual world, you could do the same thing. Pop in and out of breakout rooms. Acknowledge people in the chat when they make comments by name. Other ways to increase immediacy are getting to know something personal about each student. Know their names, more importantly, how to correctly pronounce them. Teach with urgency, but not to the point where it causes stress. Students want to know that their learning matters to you as well. This also goes back to teaching about only what students do not know. Engage them with what they do not know by using what they do know. Their time to them matters as much as yours does to you. Start the class on time and use your time wisely. Students know when time is being wasted. There's other things that you could do as well. Gesture when talking. I've been known to have to sit on my hands because I have what my husband calls the Italian hands, and I have very large gestures that he says sometimes are distracting. But there's good gestures to have when you're talking. Look at students and smile when you're talking. That's how they know you're happy to see them. Call students by name. Use we and us as you refer to the class. Don't say us and you guys when you're talking about the people who are in class versus the people who are learning at a distance. Invite students to provide feedback and use vocal variety, pauses, inflections, stress and emphasis when talking to the class. Okay, now we're at a breakout room. So I would like you to dedicate time and thought to both parts of this question. How do you build trust, demonstrate competence, show your passion, and maintain closeness in face-to-face classrooms. How do these things translate in a virtual setting? Please take a moment to think about these questions. You could either go to a breakout room or this could be facilitated as a large group chat. That's up to your principals and the time that you have allotted for this session. If you are choosing to go to the breakout room, here are your breakout room assignments. And if you choose to do a large room chat, I'm going to go back to your original question here. And principals, you can pause the video now. Okay, Module 5. Let's get to it. Teacher clarity at a distance. Again, your learning intentions for the day. I'm learning how to increase clarity in distance learning. I am learning about learning intentions and success criteria. Here's your success criteria. I can describe various aspects of teacher clarity. I can use the 3 clarity questions to plan distance learning experiences. I can analyze standards to identify concepts and skills. I can develop learning intentions that ensure students know what they're supposed to learn. I can develop success criteria that provide students ideas about what learning looks like. And I can discuss the relevance of learning expectations with students. So just take a moment and think about your practice. Can you say that you teach with clarity all the time? Sometimes? Do your students know what it is they're supposed to be learning? At some point in every lesson, the students should know what it is they're supposed to learn. Let me be very clear. The statement said, at some point, they should. There's plenty of reasons to keep your objective or learning intention from your students. Sometimes you want them to figure it out. Sometimes what you're teaching isn't really the purpose of the lesson. Sometimes it provides background. For example, the book talks about a first grade teacher that did a lesson on bats. There was a formative assessment through conversation about what they already knew. They talked about their life cycle, echolocation, dietary habits, in short, all things bats. Then they created a graphic organizer, and the teacher introduced the purpose of learning about bats to write an informational paragraph about that. Simple enough. She took a topic that was interesting to her students, provided enough background information before focusing on the expected learning. In my psychology course, I would introduce a bunch of conspiracy theories. JFK, because of course, the man on the moon, Area 51, the kids would get hooked. Then we talk about the psychology of conspiracy theories. What factors are prevalent, what's happening in society that allows these theories to take hold? Why do people want to believe in conspiracy theories? Keep in mind, many of these students just ate every single one of these conspiracy theories up. So this is always an interesting conversation to have. But even if you're working backward, the kids still need to know why. So, teacher clarity impact, 0.75. That means it's a potential accelerator of students' learning. So let's look at some of the factors that add up to this teacher clarity. In the chat, quick, draw on your own expertise. How do you ensure students know what success looks like? In other words, have you shared your goal and expectations with them? Are they able to judge their own performance? How do you know that they know? Principals, please pause here and engage in the chat. Organization, lesson tasks, assignments, activities that include links to learning intentions and success criteria, that all contributes to teacher clarity. Clarity of explanation, making sure that information is relevant, not just to you, but also to your students, that it's accurate and comprehensible to everyone. Clarity of examples and guided practice. Lesson includes information that's illustrative and illuminating, as the students require less support from you and move towards their own independence. And feedback. Feedback is important. Seek out and act upon feedback that you receive from your students, especially through verbal and written responses. Sometimes written responses are more comfortable for your students. They have more confidence to be truthful in their thoughts and their processes. So here are 3 questions that you could use to monitor if you're achieving clarity in your classroom. What am I learning today? Why am I learning this? Don't you love when they ask this question? They aren't being difficult. They want to know. If you think this question is one that they pose just to disrupt your class, I'm going to ask you to really think about why it is you believe that. Do you not have a good answer for them? Is it only because it's in the curriculum? If that's the case, then you really need to examine that thought process because there are reasons that things are in the curriculum. How does this relate to your students? Does it relate to their lives? That's key before starting any lesson. And those are answers that you should have readily available for your students. The third question, how will I know that I've learned it? Again, they should be able to recognize this from their success criteria. A great way to see if you're successful at clarity is to give these questions as an exit slip. See if their perception is the same as your intention. Nice and quick. Communicate expectations. As part of each lesson, students should know what they're expected to learn. We've discussed this. Learning intentions, objectives, learning goals. Even though there's some minor differences in the terms, we're not going to get drawn into the semantics of it. What we really care about is that the students know what it is they're supposed to be learning. This is especially important in distance learning. We know the effect size of being able to identify success criteria is 0.54, which makes it another strong accelerator of student learning. Okay, so here you see that criteria for success can be shown in many different ways. This is an example of one way to present it to your class as a whole. You can see a clear learning target, and the criteria for success clearly shows what a student would be able to do to achieve the target indicated above. This is a great example for elementary grades, some special education classes, and possibly for our ELL population. The format is simple, it's easy to follow. Another example is here. The information is the same, but the format is a bit more complicated, and there are more indicators across the board. This could be good for older students or students in more advanced classes. And here's another one. This is done in the chat. The target is clear, the task is simply stated, and the links provided. The success criteria is easy to understand. It is all there. But let me caution you about this. If you choose to do it in this manner, please be mindful that any student who may join your meet late or even after you post it will not be able to see it. Now, that's not vastly different from having a slide presented that you've moved on from. However, if you make your slides available, the students will also still have access to your learning targets, your tasks, and your success criteria. In this format, the chat will be lost for the students after you leave the meet. Okay, so when I say go, I want you to unmute your microphones. If you don't have a working microphone, don't worry, we'll accommodate you in the chat, but I will need at least 5 volunteers before moving on from this question. So take a moment to process and then join in on the conversation. There may be times when you are meeting students face-to-face. How might you capitalize on this time to prepare students to use learning intentions and success criteria in a distance learning environment? Take a second, process the question. I will ask the principals to pause here, and now, go. Module 6, engaging tasks. This will be our last module for today, but perhaps it's the most important. So, engagement. It's the core of learning. Disengaged students learn less and are often negatively labeled as unmotivated or behavior problems. We talked about this the other day, but a disengaged learner is a bored one. And if you remember, boredom is one of the few things that's a powerful decelerator for student learning, negative 0.47. So let's get started. Our learning intentions for today, I'm learning about historical and contemporary models of engagement. I'm learning about the functions and tools for distance learning. Our success criteria, I can design tasks that move students from doing to driving. I can describe the functions for which I will select learning tools. I can evaluate tools for their usefulness. I can use the task design principles in distance learning situations. And I can develop and implement a considerate schedule. Okay, so let's jump straight into a chat. How do you gauge student engagement in an online environment? Take a moment, really think about this question, and then jump in the chat. Principals, please pause here. There are many ways to judge engagement. I hope you all just had some very meaningful conversations. Historically speaking, engagement has been understood across three dimensions. The first one, behavioral engagement. These are observable academic actions that teachers instantly recognize. Two items that frequently come up here are participation and turning in work. But let's not confuse knowing how to do school and being compliant with engagement. They really are different things. The second one is cognitive engagement. This is a psychological effort students exert to master their own content. These students self-regulate, they look for challenges. Things that you can observe with these students, they plan. They monitor their own progress and not just at the end of the marking period. They set goals for themselves and they solve problems. And the last one is emotional engagement. That's the affective dimension of learning. Interests and relationships contribute to the student's ability to learn. Remember, without significant relationship, there is no learning. Learners who have a sense of belonging and have an affinity towards classmates are more likely to engage in discussions because they feel safe. They are more likely to pose questions for the same reason, seek help when they need it, and exhibit curiosity about a subject. Amy Berry interviewed a bunch of teachers in 2020 about the concept of engagement. Most often they saw as engagement as doing, participating. But the interviewed teachers wanted more than that. So she came up with this model. It has 3 forms of engagement and 3 forms of disengagement. According to Berry, students can move between this. There's a flow. We as educators want to help students go from the participating and doing to the investing and the driving. So how do we do this? How do we get students from participating to driving? Yesterday, I referenced a home ec class mentioned in the book. The teacher's name was Mrs. G. You could see it at the top here. Mrs. G took her students from participating class, recreating recipes that she provided, to driving. So giving students ingredients and allowing them to come up with their own recipes. So think school's version of Food Network's Chopped. She came up with a schedule that allowed students to be creative while still learning the essentials of home ec. During their meetings, students would present their ingredients, explain what they were going to make. An important part of this process was to document their learning. So there were videos, there were pictures, students had a tangible product that they were proud of. They also sought out feedback from others. What good is trying this if you don't know how you did? So part of this plan was to empower students to embrace their skills and then seek feedback from multiple family members. This gave a good view and a range of responses and allowed students to be able to really interpret how well they've reached their goals. What a creative idea. If you're one of our elementary or younger middle school teachers, there's a chart in the book that is a great starting point for lessons like this. It centers all around the theme of gardens and discusses how you can tie it in from everything to from fine motor skills to math to STEM, literature, and art. So make sure you take a few minutes to check it out. It's incredibly creative. This chart is also on that page. It asks the students to tell a grown-up how they're feeling that day. It's a great way to engage the parents in part of your lessons and in part of school. The book only had the pictures of the students appear at the top. I added the emojis beneath the pictures because it's a good way that you could have students tell you the same thing. They can send you these emojis in emails. They could do it in a chat. Are you giving a big test today? You might get those afraid icons because of this new atmosphere for assessments. Are they sharing out projects that they're proud of? Get ready for those excited hands. This works across all grade levels, and it really makes students get in touch with how they're feeling. It encourages them to be reflective. So let me just indulge here in a little story about these little emoji faces. When I taught US 2, I would hand out paper celebration of learnings. Remember I talked about those earlier? I tried to make tests sound fun. On every page of that assessment, there was what looked like a big circle on the bottom corner. I asked students to think about their performance on each page and draw either a smiley face, a serious face, or a sad one. It gave me a good idea on how they assessed their own performance. I found when I did this, students were genuinely less surprised when they did well or when they did poorly because they really did take the time to reflect on their knowledge and their effort that they put into the assessment. And for those of you who may be a bit skeptical, I know they loved it for two reasons. One, sometimes the drawings were funny and they would have a theme. So Elvis showed up once or twice. Of course, I had a JFK and various other famous people. The second reason I know they liked it is because once I made the deadly error of forgetting to put them on an assessment, and I thought I was going to have a mutiny on my hands. It was simple, but it worked. So it's a great idea if it's something that you can incorporate into your classroom. Okay, again, either time for a breakout room or for a big group conversation. Engagement is more than just active versus passive. What quality indicators do you use to sense when your students are investing and driving their engagement? So it'll be up to your principals now to determine if you want to go into the breakout rooms or engage in a large group discussion. Either way, I'm going to ask your principals to pause the video now. So, how do we create tasks that allow students to drive? There's lots of ways. Performance-based assessments, student-centered learning, problem-based activities, the integration of meaningful technology. On that note, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. The purpose of the task determines the tool, not the other way around. So what does that mean? There are so many tech tools that will address learning functions and help optimize engagement, but should you incorporate and use them all? In short, no. Think about what learning function does this tool fulfill? Is it worth it? Is it developmentally appropriate for my students to use it without adult assistance? Can they do it independently? Does this tool have accessibility features, things like closed captioning for students who may require that support? Think about all these things before you start throwing out tool after tool at your students. Select them with care. Think about talking to other teachers on your team, your grade level or department. See what you might want to try out together. Okay, so this book does not provide you with a long list of tools. You'll have to find that elsewhere. I would recommend Pinterest is really good. I'd also just recommend talking to your colleagues. What it does do, however, is to give some examples of tried and true tech tools that can help students expand their skills in certain areas, as evidenced by this chart. They also give examples of other types of activities that could be done in a digital classroom, including one of my favorites, Pechakucha. In addition for it to be fun to say for adults and students alike, it's also an excellent technique to teach students how to present a topic with only 20 slides, and here's the catch, 20 seconds per slide. Their presentation has to be on automatic slide advance. Now this sounds something that may let students off a little easy. What can they say in 20 seconds or 4 minutes for a total of 20 slides that can show me that they've mastered the content? But that's part of the beauty. It forces students to analyze the difference of what's essential to know and what's nice to know. It also makes them practice their presentations and speaking skills. They have to know their stuff to be able to stick to the 20-second timer for each slide. So now let's pause for a second. What's your favorite tech tool? Use the chat function to give and get some great ideas. I strongly encourage you to take note of some of the tools that your colleagues mention. There are great things coming out every day that can change the course of your class, so many that you can't even keep up. Principals, please pause the video and facilitate this conversation. Incorporating technology meaningfully and purposefully is not necessarily easy. Fisher, Fry, and Hattie provided a chart for you on page 110 of the book to help you determine what types of tools you might need to deliver meaningful instruction and what your students might need to give you products that showcase their learning. Design tasks with engagement in mind. Tasks that are busy work, keeping hands busy but minds turned off, are not going to deliver the kind of learning that keeps students engaged or moving from doing to the driving. Distance learning should also not be reduced to completing endless amounts of worksheets. So how do we make sure our students are engaged and learning in a way that suits them? Encourage students to think in more than one way by transforming from closed to open tasks. Think about posing problems or questions that can be solved in multiple ways. One of my favorite techniques in the classroom were soul lessons, and that could be done anywhere from K through 12. If you have questions on what soul lessons are, I encourage you to reach out to me. They're an absolute gift to educators, but this is a great way to move students from closed to open tasks. Moving students from just acquiring information to actually understanding by requiring students to connect and relate to it is another way to increase engagement. Debates, fish bowls, again, the soul lessons, they're all things that can transfer from the physical classroom to a virtual one, and they're things that you could do on all grade levels. Ask students what they think first, rather than telling them what they will need. What might work best to solve a problem, such as a dilemma that a character is facing, before actually letting them read what the character in fact did, is a great example. Moving from procedure to problem solving, position students to plan in a way to plan a way forward by moving from procedure to problem solving. So you don't have to outline everything for them, provide what they need to know, and let them make progress on their own. It's okay. Struggling is okay. The students need to struggle sometimes to learn. What's important is that their struggle is supported by you. You're letting them figure it out on their own, but you are there to provide the support that's necessary. If we were taught anything in the spring, it was not only to expect the unexpected, but also to embrace it. So keep everyone informed. People like predictability. Post schedules, due dates, important information on your classroom. Make sure that everyone is aware. By doing this, you're touching on a ton of components that we talked about today. Clarity, trust, relevance, all of it. And as always, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate today. We'll be covering other modules as we move throughout the school year. I wish you a safe, healthy, and fun new school year. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for your attention today. Have a great day.